If you've ever experienced a glitch in the Matrix, please do consider sending it my way. Just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. Hi, Raven. I wanted you to know that I listen to your glitch stories often. I like that I can listen and relate to others who have had experiences such as mine. I have had a few glitch experiences in my life, as well as many other experiences that can only be described as odd. And this experience that I have written out here is one of those odd experiences that was combined with a glitch experience. But for the sake of brevity, I'm only going to discuss the glitch part of the story here. There is much more to this story that I'm not willing to share right now. I'm very fortunate that I live in a rural area of Canada. I love being in the bush and try to be out there as much as possible. In the area where I live, logging roads are abundant, and I love to travel the back roads and explore, searching for new fishing holes and camping spots. One day I was traveling a road that I had been on one time before, which passed by a small lake with an attractive campsite next to it. I had stayed in this campsite once before earlier in the summer, and I was familiar with it. The road passed over a bridge with a small river that fed into the lake on the left side of the road, which the campsite bordered. The weather was bad on this day, being the 30th of October, and the transition from fall to winter was well underway. When I arrived at this point, I was disappointed that I could not go through to the camping spot that I was planning, because the road had, at some point in the recent past, washed away and was impassable. I carefully surveyed the damage and assessed if it was at all possible to pass this spot by driving around the washout. I studied the scene for a long while, trying to understand how the road would wash away right next to the bridge. It seemed odd to me that the road had washed away at all, because there was no indication of why it had washed away. The water was moving easily under the bridge, and there was not any debris blocking the flow of water, yet there was a missing piece of the road 12 feet deep and 20 feet wide right next to the bridge. I scanned the riverbank for some kind of debris along the shoreline and riverbed, but I couldn't see anything unusual. That is a lot of roadbed that was missing, and there should have been a debris trail, but there was none. Needless to say, I found this a very strange situation. I decided to just pitch my tent at the spot next to the road where I was, as it was getting late, and I had a few options of finding a suitable campsite this late in the day. The next morning I rose before sunrise, packed up and left, and because the cold weather and rain during the night had forced me to admit defeat and go home for a warm shower. After that night, I could not stop thinking about how strange that hole in the road was. The winter snow quickly came soon after, and I could not get back there to investigate further, so I resolved to return there in the spring as soon as the roads would allow. Come early March, my faithful four-wheel drive truck brought me back to that place through the patchy snow that I left late last October. However, I was thoroughly confused when I saw the road undamaged and returned to its original condition. The only conclusion that I could come to was that someone had repaired it during the winter and looked for evidence of construction equipment having been there. I found none whatsoever. There were no tire tracks, no bulldozer tracks, no evidence of an excavator digging dirt nearby for the roadbed repair at the small gravel pit about 200 yards away, and no indication that the road had even been damaged at all. I scoured the ground before and after the bridge, thinking that I had been mistaken about which end of the bridge had been washed away. But both ends were equally unaltered. There were remnants of plants that had grown the previous summer and leaves that had fallen on the roadbed that previous fall. There was no logging in the area, and there were no cottages nearby, so no reason for anyone to waste time or money to repair a barely used road during the winter. I don't know what happened. All I know is that I saw what I saw. I only want to put my story out there so that maybe there's some small scrap of information that will fit into the puzzle somewhere down the road to help us all understand what the heck is going on. Keep fighting the good fight. Signed, 71857. I have another glitch story if you would like to use it. One from 2006 that I try not to think about because of the serious impact it has had on my life ever since. It's heavy, so you may want to include a trigger warning. Here you are. For backstory, I was raised from birth by my grandparents. My grandmother and I were exceptionally close. While in college, I was in a bad car accident caused by some high school girls skipping school as I was going to work, and I ended up having to quit college, file bankruptcy, and enlist in the military as a direct result. After the military, I returned home, became a cop and EMT, married, had kids, divorced, and then finally got to return to college to finish my degree. I was a single parent to a 3- and 5-year-old, so I moved home to my grandparents to finish those last several semesters. My grandparents also raised my cousin, who at that time was 16 and in high school. His mom, my aunt, but more like a big sister since we grew up together, and she was only 8 years older than me, still lived in Iowa, where we had lived while I was growing up. We're originally from Illinois, and I had made that 468-mile trip hundreds of times over 20 years at that point. First as a kid passenger, and then as a driver myself. In 2006, my college spring break and my cousin's high school spring break started the same day. So, when my grandmother asked me a month ahead of time to take my cousin to Iowa to see his mom, I said sure. The kids and I could use the week as a vacation and visit my old high school friends too. The Saturday before we left, I had an easy A GPA helping single-day advanced cardiac CPR class to renew my certification, which I'd kept current since I had been an EMT and first responder. These are important points to remember. Now, on to the trip and the life-changing glitch. We were scheduled to leave on Friday, March 10th, 2006. That morning arrived, and I was not packed for myself nor my kids. My student aid check had just deposited that morning, and I also got an unexpected child support check. My ex didn't really like paying, and I'd only received it as a bond invasion on my ex's arrest a month earlier. So, between the kids, last-minute packing, checking the bank to make sure the money was there for the trip, a 16-year-old hovering asking if we could leave yet, it was chaotic and an unusually disorganized morning. I actually had to turn around at the front door, go back to the living room, and kiss my grandmother on the cheek goodbye to tell her I love her. I drove the 468 miles, 7 trip with a 3, 5, and 16-year-old with no problem. However, those days in Iowa left me feeling like I needed to go back home. My aunt and I went to Omaha, shopping. I visited high school friends. I took my young kids around my old haunts, but I was nagged heavily the whole time. Finally, I decided to cut the trip short and return home early. My cousin was returning Sunday with his mom, who was coming to Illinois for a visit, when her other kids started their spring break, so it wasn't a big deal to pack my kids and I up to return on Tuesday. Until my grandmother asked on the phone, "Did you get that purse like I wanted?" Unable to let her down, my aunt and I went Tuesday back to Omaha to find my grandmother a new purse. Mission accomplished. We left on Wednesday, March 15th, 2006, to return home. The date of this glitch is permanently etched into my memory. Several hours into the trip, on the straight 2-lane highway I'd driven countless times before, with my 3 and 5-year-olds as my only company driving for the 7-hour trip back home to Illinois, I was breaking the monotony talking to a friend on my cell phone. I never made a turn. I never strayed from the highway in any capacity. Yet I suddenly realized I didn't know where I was. Nothing looked familiar. I really got jolted to realize the highway sign showed a different highway instead of the one I'd traveled for the majority of my life. So I pulled over, and I asked the gas station attendant, who clearly thought I'd lost my marbles, where we were. Somehow, without turning, I went from driving east in Iowa to driving south in the middle of Missouri. I bought a map, called my grandparents, as my grandfather was a retired over-the-road truck driver, and started telling them with shock and disbelief that while driving my way home, I'm at a place that I should be hours away from. That 7-hour drive took 13 and a half hours alone. Shocked with a 3 and 5-year-old getting more and more grouchy in their car seats, and me navigating unfamiliar roads via old-school atlas maps. By the time I got to a town 45 minutes from home, where a friend lived, at 1 a.m., I couldn't safely go any further and stayed the night with her and her kids. The next day I was slow, tired, and still pondering how I ended up so far off course, and in no hurry, oddly enough, to get home. I talked to my grandmother several times that morning, and she was suddenly anxious for my return. "Hurry up, I need your help with the fish tank, and I'm anxious for my new purse," she said. A short time later, I was on my way home again and leaving the town my friend lives in. I called home to let them know I would be there in 45 minutes or so, and that I would need help with the kids and the unloading. My grandfather answered, and he never answered the phone. He was clearly shaken, telling me my grandmother was really sick, that paramedics were working on her, that she fell in the kitchen. I asked if he had called anyone else, and he said no. I said that I would, and that I would meet them at the hospital after stopping to pick up my mom on the way. The hospital was another hour away from where I was at that moment. My mom and I beat the ambulance there by half an hour. The paramedics kept pulling over because they kept losing my grandmother and had to keep shocking her. She'd had a massive heart attack, and my grandfather, with COPD and diminished lung capacity, had to do CPR, having never done it before, via 911 instructions over the phone, before giving up and putting his oxygen on her while waiting for the paramedics to arrive from 15 miles away. Ultimately, she died the next day, March 17th, 2006, from brain damage from the lack of oxygen. Had I been home, which I would have been had I not glitched into Missouri, I could have saved her. I would have done the CPR effectively and with much stronger lung capacity. I had just renewed my advanced cardiac CPR certification days before leaving on the trip. To this day, I can't figure out how I ended up in Missouri or why the glitch would happen in such a way to prevent me from saving my beloved grandmother's life. Those 3 days in 2006, March 15th, the glitch, March 16th, heart attack, and March 17th, death, are 3 of the most hated days of my life. The 4th is April 25th, 2023, with another much smaller but no less impactful glitch, but that's another story. This happened nearly 20 years ago. My son was about 12, and a friend of mine that I have known since he was 10 years old lost his older brother because of a motorcycle accident. My friend has been pretty much a brother to me, and I needed to be there for him. My son asked if he could go with me to the funeral service, because he didn't want me to go alone. We were all like family back then. So, on the day of the funeral, we headed out. The town where they had lived and where the service was taking place was about an hour drive, and I wanted to get there earlier so I could help out with a few things. The service for his brother was to start at 2 p.m., so my son and I left 45 minutes earlier so we could get there with plenty of time. And we took the same route that we always did when we went to their town. It's a pretty easy drive, and pretty much impossible to get lost on the way. We were in a 1997 Dodge Grand Caravan, a small family minivan. We were all about 3/4 of the way there, and had just gone to the last small town before we would get to their town. We come into that town, down past their Casey's gas station, stopped at the corner, turned right to head south and out of town. We would then go around 5 miles to the road that turned east to my friend's town. My son asked if we would have time to get a pop when we got there. I looked at the clock and my watch. It was only 1:13, so we had plenty of time. It would only take another 15 minutes to get there to that town. So I said sure. We were just starting up the hill, out of town. The next thing we know, we were at the intersection at the end of that route. If I turned left there, I would have ended up heading to Peoria. I would have to turn around and head back the way that we came to get to the proper turn. How the heck did I miss that turn? It is plainly marked, and I've driven it dozens of times. It was 2 miles back, but then I noticed the time. It was 1:14. My watch showed that too. I asked my son what time it was when we left that last town, because he saw it too. He said 1:13. Okay, that confirmed what I knew should be right, but it was now 1:14. A minute? Only a minute had passed? That can't be right. But according to the clocks, it was. It was weird. It wasn't like I blinked or had spaced out. Neither one of us knew what happened, just all of a sudden there we were, at the intersection. Neither of us had any memory of anything. Nothing, just poof. We went from the edge of that town to this point instantly. So I figured out 7 miles in 1 minute is 420 miles per hour. Now, I'm not sure if the amount of time was an exact minute. It might have been a little less. Neither one showed seconds. But 420 miles per hour? That's pretty good for a minivan. We couldn't understand any of it. It kind of left us both a bit unsettled because we both knew what time it had been. I want to make a note that this road goes right through the middle of a bunch of wind turbines. I've always wondered if there may have been a chance that this could be an effect caused from the way some of these are positioned, or maybe were in operation. Maybe someone has thoughts about this. Could that happen? This happened sometime in either 1989 or 1990, when I was about 15 years old, give or take a year, in a small Midwestern town. I was riding the bus home from school. A few minutes before arriving at my house, I reached into my pocket to discover that I didn't have my house key. I could picture where it was in my room because I always put it in the same place. I didn't really have any friends on the bus, so I didn't say anything about it to anyone. I just hoped that a family was home and could let me in. But I knew that my dad wouldn't be home yet, and I was pretty sure both my mom and older sister were at their part-time jobs that afternoon. Sure enough, when the bus dropped me off, I noticed that my sister's car wasn't in the driveway. The garage door was closed, so I couldn't tell if my mom was home. Our house had 5 exterior doors. There was one in the front, south, one on the east, one on the west, one going into the garage, not counting the big door for the cars, and one going to the breezeway between the house and the garage. Unless my mom was home and met me at the front door, I would always use the breezeway door. My mom didn't greet me, so I walked to the breezeway door and rang the doorbell, hoping someone was home. But there was no answer. I pounded on the door for a bit on the off chance that the doorbell had stopped working or otherwise couldn't be heard, but no one came. I figured all of the doors in the house, this one was the most likely to be accidentally left unlocked, because it was the one that was used to let the dog out multiple times a day. There was a window in the door, so for security reasons, the lock required a key on both sides. That is, even on the inside, you needed a key to operate the lock. It wasn't just a lever that you could turn. Since the door was used frequently, my parents kept a key in the breezeway, hidden a few feet from the door. I spent several minutes ringing the doorbell, pounding on the door, grabbing the knob, turning it both left and right, and pushing on the door. Much longer than any sane person should. I kept at it for so long in case my mom was home but had the vacuum or some other loud appliance running and just hadn't heard me. I finally gave up. No one was home to answer the door, and I had confirmed that the door wasn't accidentally left unlocked. I walked to a neighbor's house 2 doors down. They were good family friends, so I knew I could stay there, but there was no answer at their door. And then I went to a house just across the street from mine and knocked on their door. I knew the kids who lived there, and hung out with them occasionally, although not very much since they were a few years younger than me. Their mom answered, and she said that the boys had gone down to the library. I thought, okay, the library is just a few blocks away and it would be a safe place for me to hang out until my family got home. But first, I figured I would do a full methodical check of all the doors at my house, just to make sure that none of them had been left unlocked. I walked back across the street and went to the front door of my house. It was locked, as I expected. Not that it would have helped had it been unlocked, because it led to a porch that had another locked door between it and the rest of the house. I walked around the east side of the house and tried the east porch door. Same situation. It was locked, and again, even if I had gotten in, I wouldn't be able to get very far, because it also had another locked door between the porch and the house. I proceeded to the garage. The utility door into the garage also had a window. Because it was so sunny out and no lights were on in the garage, I couldn't see into the window very well to see if there was a car in the garage. I pressed my face against the glass, and I used my hands to block as much sunlight as I could. From what I could see, it looked like the garage was empty, but I couldn't tell for certain. Anyway, that door was locked too. At this point, the most sane thing for me to do would have been to go around to the west side of the house and check the one door that I hadn't tried yet. But for some strange reason, I felt compelled to try the breezeway door again. I was overcome with 2 thoughts simultaneously. The first thought was, this is stupid. I just spent 5 minutes pounding on that door, turning and twisting the doorknob and pushing on that door to the point that I was worried I would break it. And the second thought was, I'm a scientific guy, so I'm going to approach this methodically and try every door, completely ignoring my previous attempt. It's hard to describe the strange feeling I had as I walked over to the breezeway door. It was a strange feeling of being pulled back to that door. I felt that it wasn't right, that it made no sense. And why am I even bothering to check it? But something kept pushing me toward it. I walked up to the door, turned the knob and gave it a push, and the door opened easily. I walked inside, turned around to inspect the inside of the lock, and discovered that the key was kept in the room, had been inserted into the door and had been turned, unlocking it. I looked into the garage, no cars, so neither parent was home. My sister's car was still not in the driveway either. I was the only one home. Even when I briefly visited the 2 neighboring houses, I was never out of sight of my house. So I would have seen anyone coming or going, in a car or on foot, but I saw no one. I haven't mentioned this to very many people. Years later, a skeptic once laughed at this story and told me it had to be a neighborhood kid playing a joke on me, but that explanation doesn't make any sense to me. First, who would do it? No one ever confessed to it. No one even knew that I had forgotten my key that day. Heck, I didn't even know I had forgotten my key until just a few minutes before the bus pulled up to my house. If someone was playing a joke, they would have had a key to the house, but also know where the key was hidden in the breezeway so they could insert it into the lock where I found it. And they would have had to have gotten to the house, or at least be in the house, and had left without me seeing them, despite me being within eyesight of the house the entire time. And on top of all this, they would have had to know to pull this trick on the one and only day that I ever forgot my key, that I didn't even know I had forgotten until just before this event. I have no idea how that door got unlocked. A glitch, a helpful spirit, or some other paranormal phenomenon. This happened to me and my boyfriend less than a month ago, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I moved to a small town in Missouri half a year before this. We hadn't learned the ins and outs of it very well, so we were using GPS for the places that were surrounded by rural land. We had just taken my dad to the hospital for a procedure, which is in a very rural part of this place, and I decided that we should go to the library to wait for him to call me and let me know when to pick him up. My boyfriend loaded up the GPS and we started driving down the freeway back to town. It's a straight shot with a couple of turns as you're getting back into the urban area. All of a sudden, we're on a small 2-lane road surrounded by wilderness that leads to a dead end. All of the houses on this road are old and abandoned. Me and him look at each other and start asking what the hell just happened. My boyfriend decided he wanted to see what was at the end before turning around. The dead end was a closed-off street with warning signs surrounding it. Then to the left was a parking lot to a trail in the woods. We decided to not talk about it then because I was worried about my dad, and we just went to the library. When we got home, we sat down and talked about how weird it was. We were on the freeway talking, and then we were on this random road. My boyfriend has never had a problem following GPS while we are talking, and I'm a nervous person in cars, taking in all of my surroundings. It's like we teleported. We are both spiritual, so we chalked it up to us being meant to find that trail, although we were too scared to go back. I want a logical explanation. I've run through it so many times, but nothing. We just ended up being there. As spiritual as I am, I'm still a skeptical person, and I just can't make sense of this. Hey Raven, my story is a little silly, yet nonetheless eerie and bizarre in nature. I live at home with Mom and Dad right now while I'm saving for a house. They don't get out much, so I always do the grocery shopping for the household. I live in southern Louisiana, and we always buy the same brand of smoked sausage for our gumbo and jambalaya. We only buy this one certain Cajun brand called Richard's. Several weeks ago, I was going through the freezer to cook, and I noticed this pack of Polish smoked sausage that I have never seen before. I asked my mom and dad if they got it, and neither of them had any idea where it came from. We don't typically have visitors either. I did end up cooking it and just blowing it off. Here's where it gets strange. The next day after eating said mystery sausage, my mom, dad, and myself, we all fell extremely ill. We just kind of laughed it off and started calling it the mystery sausage and blamed it on that. As the days went by, we just forgot about it. In this past week, I went to the kitchen to cook dinner, and to my disbelief, that same brand of Polish sausage is in my freezer. I asked my parents if they were playing a joke on me, and they were just as freaked out as I was. I even went as far as to read the label on the sausage and go to the website. The sausage comes from a small mom-and-pop type butcher in central Texas, nearly 7 hours away from where I live. We've even asked family members who may have dropped in for a visit if they perhaps gifted it to us, but none of them have any clue how we got it, and said they did not give it to us. Here is where it gets more strange. When I googled the address to the butchery that makes the sausage, it's a very small rural town where my ex-husband passed away. Now, this isn't a town like Houston or Dallas. It's a very small town that no one has probably ever heard of, so that's not just a coincidence. We still wonder how it kept just showing up here, and it honestly gives me the heebie-jeebies. I've been listening to you for quite some time now, and had never experienced a glitch of my own until this past summer. I wrote this shortly after it all happened, but wasn't sure if this was an actual glitch. I've finally decided to see what others think of this. Just before Independence Day of 2023, my fiancé and I were at a local shopping center when I received a notification on my phone that I had a new voice message. I was puzzled because my phone had no missed calls, so I decided to go ahead and listen to the message right then. What I heard was two people talking amongst themselves, in what sounded like a crowded place. I brought this to my fiancé's attention and let him listen too. We both brushed it off as a spam call and went about our shopping. As we were approaching a clearance display about 15 minutes later, my fiancé and I overheard an older couple, maybe early 70s, having the exact conversation that was left in my voicemail. First off, I'd like to say Happy New Year to everyone, and Happy New Year to you too, Raven. Happy New Year to you as well. I don't know if this was a genuine glitch or a really bizarre coincidence, but I decided to submit this story because I still can't wrap my head around it. Side note, I'm not good at writing stories and I'm not the most articulate, so excuse me if things don't make sense or look out of place. Anyways, this took place last month, while I was on my way to pick up my boyfriend from work. I live in a little commuter city in Southern California called Eastvale. His job at the time was about 10 minutes away from our place, but the traffic added an extra 10 minutes to the route. For those that don't know, this part of the region is known as the Inland Empire, or the IE, roughly an hour away from LA and Disneyland. Anyways, I digress. I was driving on Interstate 15 north, attempting to merge onto Interstate 10 going east. Just for a bit of context, there's an on-ramp right before the junction that connects with the lane that takes you east. Luckily, I only have to get off the first street after getting on the interstate, Etiwanda Avenue. For those that really know, getting off on Etiwanda Avenue is almost like merging onto the 210 via 60 East. If you know, you know. As I was attempting to merge, a big dark gray-colored Chevy Tahoe with aftermarket rims and a big exhaust that was loud enough to hear from the high desert, again, if you know, you know, was getting onto the freeway and was attempting to merge onto the 15. I let him, of course, and see him attempting to merge into the deep, heavy California traffic. And keep in mind, this all happened a little bit after 5 p.m., so the traffic was bad. I drive on by, minding my own business and listening to music. I was just about reaching my exit when I saw that exact same Chevy getting onto the interstate. Same color, same big exhaust, same tinted windows, everything. You're probably thinking, dude, most Chevys look the same. Okay, yeah, but what are the odds of seeing a vehicle modified the exact same way? I saw the driver merge into congested traffic, and for said driver to reappear again in less than a minute getting onto the 10, it's just not possible. Once I picked up my boyfriend, I told him about the experience and he couldn't even figure it out himself. I'm still left in shock. Does anyone have answers? Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. One day, my mom and I were going to a funeral. We attended the wake and afterwards got in our car. I asked my mother where the funeral would be since she was in charge of the invitation. She said that she had no idea and didn't bring the invitation. She told me to follow someone from the wake. So we started following another family member as they drove in their dark green car. I know a lot of funerals do the things where they all drive together, will have their lights on, and even little flags so the people in mourning can stay together. But for whatever reason, this funeral, we weren't doing that. It worked out fine as we followed the green car. We came to an intersection that I know quite well. We arrived at the end of the road at the light. We could only go left or right, and the car we were following was still ahead of us, no other cars in between us. They were turning left, and so were we. There was only one lane to turn left, one lane to turn right. Once you turned left, there was another light right after the first intersection. So we turned left, following immediately after the green car. There were no other cars that could have merged into our lane as it was one left-hand lane. We turned, still behind the green car. The next intersection had a red light, so we came to a stop behind the green car. It was still one lane of traffic, nowhere for any of us to go until the light turned green. While we waited, we started talking, just normal chit-chat. Then I looked at the car ahead of us. We're following a dark green car, right? Yeah. Where is it? We were still at that second intersection. The light hadn't turned green, we hadn't moved an inch. Yet the dark green car was completely gone, and a tan car was in its place. The make of the car was completely different as well. The light turned green and we started driving again, though by now my mom and I were flipping out. Where did the car go? There was nowhere for it to have gone. There was only one lane of traffic. No one could have merged into our lane. That dark green car was completely gone. Also, where were we supposed to go? Well, by that point, my mom remembered the church's name, and we did eventually find our way there. It's the most bizarre glitch that I've experienced. The car completely disappeared and changed. After years, I discovered these glitch in the Matrix stories appearing online. I was listening to some recently and texted my mother asking if she remembered the car changing. I have expected her to reply, "What are you talking about?" But to my surprise, she remembered it. She is still confused about what actually happened, and has no idea where that car disappeared to. And, most importantly to me, it wasn't a dream. It really happened. So that, my friends, was this week's Glitch in the Matrix collection. Collection of strange, weird, and bizarre stories that I hope you enjoyed. I know I did. I always enjoy them, otherwise I would not be narrating them on a weekly basis. 160 times over. More than that, I don't even know the exact number. And I feel like looking right now would be cheating, so I'm not going to do that. 172, actually. I lied. I did go do that, so yeah. I don't know. I felt the need to go look, because I wanted an exact number, so. All that said, friends, I do hope you enjoyed this week's collection of Glitch in the Matrix stories. I apologize if my voice sounds a little weird in this outro. Don't ask. It's just more cold lung crap coming up, so I've been coughing a lot still. Is what it is. Just have to relax the voice, drink some tea, have some honey. I'll be okay. It may sound a little different from the outro because the stories were recorded prior to today. The outro was recorded today, so, yeah. Anyways. If you did enjoy the stories, please do hit that thumbs up button. That really would help quite a bit. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing, as that also would help quite a bit. And it is freaking cold here. How about that? How are you doing in the weather? How's your winter, if it's winter where you are? Because let me tell you, it is definitely winter here where I am. Snow, ice, negative 24 degrees. It's pretty crazy. Anyways, you can also join Patreon and memberships to get early access to content like this if you want to. Never expected, always appreciated. There's also the super thanks, which is just a tip to the channel and helps a lot. So, yeah. All that said, let's move on to the word of the week. Last week, a good number of you left me a comment with the word of the week, which happened to be obfuscate. I figured I would just tell you and not obfuscate what the word was. Yeah. On the screen now and several moments prior to now is a collection of the screenshots of the people who left me comments with the word of the week. I shall not be obfuscating them. They shall be visible for all to see on the screen. So long as I don't forget to put them up like I did that one week. I won't. I hope. Anyways, thank you to each and every single one of you who left me a comment last week. You all went above and beyond. You are amazing, and I appreciate you more than I could ever say. Now, this week, the word of the week is one that is stuck in my mind because of how it feels outside. So the word of the week is frigid. F-R-I-G-I-D. Means intensely cold, lacking warmth or ardor, or lacking imaginative qualities. Insipid. It is frigid outside. It's so cold. Anyways, friends, hope you're having a beautiful week, and hope you have a great week for the rest of the week. Not so far, it just started, so, well, also so far, but, you know. Anyways, until I see you again, my friends, remember you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until I see you again, my lovely friends, much love, and sleep well.